Let's transition from the relating phase and overcoming the barrier of no trust to the discovering phase and overcoming that barrier of no need. And this is where we're raising the task tension. Herb, just any general comments as we transition into the discovering phase that you'd want to share with our district managers and area managers?
Yeah, sure. But just a couple of things. It's more about reinforcement, what we discussed previously around relating. Just do a little reset. So just think about where we are now. Your people have done a good job of lowering that relationship tension. They've demonstrated credibility. They've demonstrated empathy. They've done a pretty good job of beginning to build a foundation of trust. And what that translates into is they have literally earned, and I use that word, they've earned the right now to begin to discover and begin to truly dig into understanding what their customers want, which is where we are right now. Just keep in mind, relating is still taking place. Now, discovering. What I like to say is, everyone, is I use the word sometimes the magic of discovery. This is where the heavy lifting takes place. This is where the work gets done right here. Everything just comes into form when your people do this really, really well. So the key will be is, as we go through this particular module, as you work with your people on this one is to stress the need for thoroughness and patience. What I've seen is there's a tendency for our people to rush through this. As I look at all the phases of the council process, this is the one where I typically see the most shortcomings. People tend to go through it too quickly, they advocate too soon. The saving grace for us is the competition tends to be even worse. But that's not, we don't want to roll that way. We want to make sure we do a nice job here as we cover the skills and behaviors to stay in discovery, to make sure we get complete understanding of our customers from a business perspective and from a personal perspective. And that way, the next phase, which could be advocated, becomes a fun and a natural next step. The real work is done here.
Herb, I love it, and I wholeheartedly agree. Discovering the hardest of the phases of the sales process we want to be impatient, rush through it. Sometimes well-intended, like, hey, I see the problem and I can help solve it. And we get over-eager and need to, like you said, be a little bit more patient, slow down, and help the customer bring awareness to his or her own gap. Exactly. Which brings us to the gap, which is the foundational concept of discovering. How would you introduce that and re-emphasize that as a district manager or area manager leading this session?
Yeah, well, the gap model, this is in fact what Discover is about. Really getting your people to be fully versed in understanding the gap and what it really means, and be able to work and plan their interactions around the gap, getting complete information around the gap, what the customer has, what the customer wants, and really looking at the difference between the two and using the proper skills in order to make that difference as wide as possible. So spend some time with your people discussing the implications of the gap and make sure you understand the gap. And importantly, as they get information around the gap, I always take people back to the time tension model. The key here is to get good information around the gap while maintaining low relationship tension and allowing that good positive task tension to continue to grow. You still got to manage tension even in the discovery part of the process.
So let's go ahead and dig deeper with the gap, Herb, as far as the things that we would want to discover on the have side and on the want side, so we're not rushing through this, that we are really genuinely helping the customer bring awareness to the gap, because if there's no gap, there's no sale, right? The easiest thing in life to do is nothing. Why would I change if I don't have a gap? So what advice would you give as far as you really looking and digging into these pieces around the gap?
Yeah, and what we offer you as a part of the training suite that you're going to get in your district manager toolbox is we offer a lot of examples of the things you want your people to explore and get information around the gap, beginning with the have side, or what we sometimes call current status. Be able to take the time to ask them questions to get some feedback to properly identify what's the customer's current situation. around levels of satisfaction, around history and background, what kind of problems have they been having already, and really build out that as much as possible. And also, as you go through this dialogue, to ask questions in the right way where you can comfortably transition back and forth around the gap. So begin on the have side, which is a nice place to start, ask the right kind of questions, get some understanding, and then also begin to talk about transition on the want side. What would they like to have? What would they like to see? What kind of advantage they're looking for? What kind of value they want to capture and maintain? Ask those kind of questions. And then when you have this kind of discussions, what will happen is you begin to see a gap begins to create. Now, once you see that, once your people see that, you want to let them know you can't just stop there. Because the magic of discovery, the requirement for good discovery is not just enough to help create a gap. You want to make it as wide as possible. You want to help your customers identify a gap. It has to be their gap, they have to own it. But when you really do this well, when your people do this really, really well, good discovery, they are able to help their customers feel the gap. That's the magic of discovery. They can feel the pain of the gap, or they can feel the pleasure of what it can be like if you can close the gap. That's why discovery is such a big deal, and that's what this model is really, really about. As Pete accurately said, in the real world, sometimes it could happen. You can do an excellent job in discovery, and through that whole process, you could end up not having a gap. You know what? That's not a problem. That's a good thing that we've done it correctly, because no gap means what, Pete? No gap means?
No sale.
There you go. No sale and no goal. But it's okay, because what it means is we've done our jobs correctly, we're focused on the customer, and it's completely legitimate, and the right thing to do is to hold the presses. Don't force it. That can be a bad sale. No gap means no go, and we should comfortably, and I use that word, disengage. You want to stress that to your people, because in the interest sometimes of getting a sale, sometimes they'll just plug ahead and go forward anyway, when the right thing to do is just slow down a little bit and wait and stay close. Because in our world, in the whirlwind, how often do things change?
Frequently.
All the time. So if you just stay close, continue to invest in a relationship, stay close, continue to build and maintain trust, you will get your shot. They will call you in at some point and let you know now it's time to move forward, and you can begin to expand that gap.
Herb, I loved your emphasis on widening out the gap, because sometimes, we're maybe overly exuberant, we get like a sliver of a gap, and then we try to drive our solution into that gap, but there's not enough there, and in our exuberance, we are asking the customer to buy for our reasons instead of the secret, the meaning of life, to allow the customer to buy for his or her reasons.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. That's the whole key. We talked about it before. Customers buy for their reasons, not ours. And customers love to buy and hate to
Be sold.
That's it. Right. As long as we maintain that here, we're going to come out okay in that regard.
Fantastic. So all these things we want to discover, how are we going to do it? We need to really dig into the task and personal motives. What is their logical, practical, business reason for making a decision, right? So what advice do you have for helping our district managers and area managers emphasize the importance of discovering that with our customers?
Yeah, Pete, this may sound oversimplified. The first thing is we have to discover it. The first thing is we got to make sure that we discover motives, and not all of a sudden go through the whole process and end up scratching our head. I'm not sure what the motives are. That's the first thing. Part of it again is planning for it. You got to plan that. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be very deliberate around having a dialogue, asking some questions to begin to get at those motives, task and personal motives. A couple of caveats. We all know that there are four task motives. We get that. And a task motive is something that's aligned with another human being. It doesn't mean if you're working with 5 people, they won't have the same task motive. It could be different. it could very well be different. Now, what we see is, and I think the people may be familiar with this, is task motives typically tend to be driven down from the top. That's just the way it works in a real business world because of the way customer operations are set up, because of the whole relationship between your business drivers and business initiatives and what they want to work on. They tend to be driven down from the top. Therefore, a lot of times you'll see one or two task motives in play, but you could have all four. Not a problem, because we do good discovery to determine what it is. And a task motive is assigned to an individual. That's the key. We got to make sure we identify that. Same thing on the personal motive side. We have to make sure we get it and understand what it is and validate that it's correct. How do you do it? Not rocket science. You have to ask questions. You have to listen to people's responses, and you got to validate that what you heard is what they said. That's the key. What you will see is, what your people will realize very quickly is, getting all this stuff done sets the tone for how you're going to advocate. It is mission critical that they clearly identify all task motives that are in play in that opportunity, and also all the personal motives that are in play.
Yeah, Herb, I loved how we were kind of just laughing a little bit about the simplicity of it. It's simple, but you have to do it many, many times, right? So you're identifying the logical, practical business reason, the task motive for every key decision maker, key decision influencer in that buying chain, and those are things that we need to discover as well. And those task motives, as Herb mentioned, are aligned with the rear wheel, right? The technical piece, the task components of it, and we can't stop there, right? We need to discover the personal motives for those people as well. All the key players involved, and if you have that balance again to the bicycle of the logical, practical business reason, as well as the emotional, personal reason. What are they going to get out of this? It's going to help strengthen your discovery. It's going to help widen the gap, for that each individual that's making a decision.
Absolutely. That's a nice way to sum it up, I think. Perfect.
Fantastic. And her transitioned us, the way we're going to do that, and what it's going to help you see is that people are going to change for either pain or gain, right? And to build that out, we're going to have to ask good questions, and by doing that, we need to understand, to help us do that, we need to understand the four categories of questions, and we have permission questions, fact-finding questions, feeling-finding questions, and expanding scope questions. We'll dig into each one, but Herb, just any overarching thoughts about the different categories of questions?
Yes, just a couple of things on this, Pete. Again, it seems simple. However, sometimes we refer to this as the art of questioning. There's an art to it, how you ask questions. Because each one of the discovery questions is designed to get some very, very specific information on the gap, around the gap, and it allows you to comfortably transition back and forth around the gap to get that information. So there's an art to it, and it does require a lot of practice to make sure it doesn't come across as being more of an interrogation, come across as being too scattered, because anything like that, you run the risk, once again, of undermining or increasing relationship tension. We keep going back to that tension thing again. That's why it's very important that people become well-versed, very confident around how they ask questions to get information. Remember, the goal is you want to keep your customers talking about relevant information around the gap. So we have to put the question out there, let them answer the question, and we have to keep it going to make it a dialogue. That becomes very, very important. So we have four buckets that Pete talked about. The tendency is, without the proper practice, without the proper grounding, our people, many times, I've done this many times by default, they will fall on one bucket of questions, and that's it. Have you seen that, Pete?
Where were you on the night of the 14th, Herb? We want to interrogate the fact-finding questions, and that's typically our failing. As technical people, degreed engineers, we just want to know the facts.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And that's the reason why, even for this phase of the process, planning becomes important. It makes a difference. To plan to use all of the discovery questions that are necessary to get what? Complete information around the gap. That becomes the key here.
Yeah, and digging in a little bit further, Herb, I think we don't want to minimize the importance of the fact-finding questions. We need to understand the what of the current status, but if we only stop there, then we are inherently then going to superimpose our thoughts about the consequences or implications of those facts.
Correct.
And while we need to have our opinion of them, more importantly, we need to have the customer share and have keen awareness as to that. So not stopping at the fact finding and really bridging to the feeling finding questions to get the customer to share their so what is key. So what advice would you give to district manager, area managers leading this session to help their teams get better at the feeling finding questions?
Role plays. Role plays. Role plays. Practice. 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 Set up some scenarios and simply give your people an opportunity to practice using all the different discovery questions. An easy way to do that is to come up with a scenario that you've identified as to what the issues are, kind of hold it back, and then give them an opportunity to use the discovery questions to see how well they can identify what those issues are around the gap. Just regular practice on a regular basis. There's no shortcut to it. And that's how they're going to get better at it.
Fantastic, Herb. One of the categories of questions that we haven't discussed that's really important is the expanding scope. Where sometimes the simplicity of the expanding scope questions can really be our friend, and we shortchange those. So what advice, in addition to practice, which is always the golden rule, would you give to again our sales leaders out there as they're delivering these sessions?
Yeah, exactly right. Pete, thanks for bringing that up, because Pete's right. The expanding scope question allows us to be disciplined about the concept of less of us and more of our customer. The expanding scope question helps us maintain that dynamic, because what it does is it simply puts the question out there, and then we can sit back and listen to what the customer has to say. For example, take a tell me more question. Simple question. One of the most powerful discovery questions that your people can use are tell me more questions. But look at what it means. Tell me more. That's all you gotta do. Or you can say, oh. Or you can think about that. But the wealth of information you can get for utilizing an expanded scope question like that is just valuable beyond belief in terms of wealth of information you're going to get from a customer. If the relationship tension is low, we said that we got it low, they're comfortable now, we're simply encouraging them to continue to share their story. The expanding scope question is a great way to encourage our customers to tell you their story from their perspective, which is what we're trying to learn here. That's what I recommend. Get your people comfortable using those questions a lot as they go through the discovery process.
Herb, I love that. Tell me more, probably our most misused opportunity as a direct question, and as Herb really emphasized, powerful responsive listening. And responsive listening, all that is tell me more, with tone and or body language in addition to the words itself. So outstanding, sage advice. How about checking questions and catch-all questions inside a expanding scope there?
Yeah, those are, again, each question is very valuable. You take a checking question, for example, but by the word itself, checking, it says it's important that we make sure that what the customer said is what we heard and what they continue to have us hear. So that's why we check, number one. Another valuable checking question is, of course, it keeps the customers involved. It keeps they're in control. We want to make sure that we give them control. We're just directing traffic. We help them control the process. And also what it does is it helps us manage, and I'll use this terminology, the cadence of the call, the pacing of the call. Part of the challenge that people are going to have is not getting ahead of themselves, trying to think ahead, trying to slow things down, keeping things flowing correctly. A checking question allows that to happen as well.
Herb, I love it, and I liked how you said slowing things down and maintaining the cadence, because in essence, what we really want to do in good salesmanship and good discovery is be on the same page, with our customer, right? We don't want to be up here and then down here, or vice versa. So checking questions are a great way to make sure that we're on the same page, we're conveying understanding, building agreement one step at a time. And that, in essence, is good discovery. It's helping us be on the same page and dancing to the same sheet of music.
Exactly right. And the catch-all, I think you mentioned the catch-all piece. The catch-all question is a great question to use. If we're at the end of an important topic, make sure before we move on to another topic, it's appropriate to use the catch-all question. Or if we're at the end of a discovery call, use the catch-all question. Or if we're at the end of a discovery process. A lot of reasons why you need to use the catch-all question. Really easy to use. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? What did I miss? It's a simple question, but it gives you a lot of information that you know it's okay to transition to another topic or to move on in a different direction.
Fantastic. Herb, there are many types of feeling-finding questions, and the importance of those feeling-finding questions soliciting opinions, and so we have the feeling-finding questions. We have best least questions. We have magic wand questions, and we have third-party reference questions as feeling-finding questions. Share any thoughts about those questions and how they can be used?
Yeah, again, as I said earlier, Pete, those questions are designed to get specific information around the gap or to get you at specific points on the gap. For example, you start out with the fact-finding question on the half side of the gap, and then at some point you have to make that transition across the gap. Well, a nice way to begin to do that is you can use, for example, a best least question. It allows you to comfortably transition across the gap, to begin to think about levels of satisfaction, to begin to think about what's the bar that you're going to have to meet at some point in order to satisfy that customer. And then once you get there, of course, you can use the old infamous magic wand question. Get your customer to dream. That puts you squarely now on the wrong side of the model. So you want to make sure your people, and it's a good idea to always take the time to take your people back to have them review those definitions. Because definitions are important. The definition of those questions are very, very important. You need to understand what those questions mean, and also to understand specifically where can they be used most effectively as you get information around the gap. That requires some practice and some reinforcement and coaching to make sure they get that.
Thanks, Herb. One question that's not on there is the concept of a paired question. So what advice would you give our district managers and area managers as far as the paired questions?
Yeah, that's one that is very important for the whole discovery process. And part of it is what you alluded to earlier, Pete, is what we see many times because of our technical background, our back wheel skills, our interest to get the facts. There can be a tendency sometimes to overuse fact-finding questions. Typically what we recommend as a best practice is when you look at the ratio of fact-finding and feeling-finding questions, we say the ratio should be, qualitatively speaking, 1-to-1 to 2-to-1, fact to feeling. Fact to feeling. That may change depending upon who you're working with, depending upon what the motives are, what the social style is, but as a rule of thumb, 1-to-1 to 2-to-1. Now, a paired question then is a great way to make sure we get good information on the topic, how they feel about the facts about the topic, how they feel about it, and to make sure we maintain that good ratio of 1-to-1. So a paired question is a great technique to get good discovery information, to make sure we don't get the fact, the feeling out of balance, and continue to get information and keep our customers talking. The paired question is a great way to maintain that balance.
Fantastic, Herb. So we ask all these great questions, and you alluded to the power and importance of responsive listening. We have 3 different types of listening: intentional listening, responsive listening, and pings. What advice would you give to our district managers and area managers leading this session?
Well, the first thing is just an acknowledgement that this is not easy. Listening is not easy. And we want to acknowledge that as being sales leaders and coaches, that we get it. Even though we got 2 ears, listening is one of the most difficult things for our sales profession. We acknowledge that first. The other good thing you want to acknowledge to your people is listening is a skill. It's a skill, like all the other skills we're talking about. Because it is a skill, it can be improved, here we go again, with practice. It can be improved with practice. We can all be better listeners. So just think about that, and certainly I would ask you to challenge your people on this one. Think about the times they've gone on, for example, joint sales calls. I've done it many times. Go on a joint sales call. We sit in the call, have a nice interaction with the customer. We walk out the call and we do a debrief. And we start talking about what we heard. Sometimes we compare notes. You wonder whether or not we were in the same call. because yes, listening is a very, very difficult thing for a lot of reasons when you get right down to it. So it does require, again, practice. So I would suggest that when you get an opportunity to do some of the CSP reinforcement, to spend some time practicing on the listening skills. Now, we break it up into 3 areas now. We talk about intentional listening, as you know. We talk about responsive listening, and we talk about pings. The thing you want the people to understand is, to get complete and comprehensive listening, you need to use all 3. You need to do all 3 of these, and do them all very, very well. That does require practice.
Herb, I love the common theme here that you're hearing about practice, and with regards to the questions and with the listening, you're going to have opportunities during this session to practice. You'll have your team listing out the common questions that they ask right now, and then look to build some confidence and conscious competence as to the types of questions that they're asking that are effective, types of questions that they're asking that maybe aren't effective, and then building out their repertoire, if you will, to include some more feeling-finding questions, and just get more comfortable asking more expanding scope questions with that. And then you're going to have active listening exercise in here to really practice and to simply reinforce. And it sounds so easy, but if you are truly listening in a responsive manner, just like Herb had modeled, with the words themselves, with tone of voice, as well as with body language, you're going to encourage the other person to talk more. And this is absolutely one of my most favorite exercises when I facilitate this session, because what you'll find is you will hear the decibel level just explode in the room when you're doing this. Why? Because people get excited when they're actually talking about something, when someone's interested in listening to them. And that should send a powerful message to you. Oh crap, if I do this with my customer and prospect, they're going to get excited and they're going to tell me more too. And so if I'm really embracing and using this responsive listening, it's going to help make me a better sales professional. Or anything to add to that? Is there debriefing that exercise?
You know what, Peter, I think you did it really well. The exercise itself is all about giving the people a chance to practice it, to use these responsive listening skills, and then just talk to the observers about how well they did, how well they came through the exercise, and continue just to practice over and over again. You can never overdo this one. You can never overdo this. You can never practice this skill too much. Just continue to stay with it and practice it.
Fantastic. And what's the best way to show someone that you've listened to them? Is simply to restate back in your own words what your conversation was, and if the purpose, process, payoff is the introduction to our sales call, the discovery agreement is the summary of our sales call, and this is tremendously powerful component. And as Herb alluded to, there are typically many sales calls that are involved before you close a piece of business. It's not a one call close. In my 26-year career, I only had one call close in my entire career. So by definition, there are going to be multiple calls. And what that means is each call itself has a discovery agreement, right? So there should be something that I'm going to need to do, and something hopefully that the customer is going to need to act upon, where we've agreed to, and we're moving together as we're raising that task tension. So Herb, advice, comments about discovery agreement.
Yeah, Peter, I think you captured it pretty well. This is what we have to do at the end of a discovery call. Plain and simple. Your people simply cannot walk out the door without taking the time to do this. Because what we're doing is we're building agreement one interaction at a time. We're building task tension one interaction at a time. Just review the protocol, because all you're doing is summarizing that discussion. No more complicated than that. People tend to overcomplicate this one. All you're doing is summarizing what was discussed, the key points around the gap. If it was not discussed in the call, we do not bring it up in the discovery agreement. It's just that simple. Just maintain that alignment. So we talk about, we always ask for permission. We know how that works. We ask for permission first. It's around propriety and let the customers be in control. And then you simply begin to do your summary around the gap. Make it personal. Make it real. You can use their words, which connects even more. At the end of it, we always get agreement that what we just shared was on point, and we talk about what's going to happen next, when, and who's going to do it. Now think about what that does. Think about the momentum that creates. That every time that you sit down with the customer, at the end of that important interaction, there's clear agreement around what you discuss. Clear agreement, clear understanding. There's a win. It's almost like you're going through a mini, M-I-N-I, a small close at every interaction. It creates an environment of win-win.
Herb, I love the word that you chose there of momentum, right? Because we have a nice trajectory of our sales campaign, right? There's a path moving forward, right? And I sometimes like to think of an analogy where we are climbing a mountain, and when we get to the top of the mountain, we've closed the business. And each discovery agreement is where we put a peg in the mountain as we climbed higher, right? So we don't fall down all the way to the bottom of the mountain, because we've earned that right to the next step as we're continuing on our journey, bringing self-awareness, widening the gap in the customer's eyes, right? Now, Herb, do we do the discovery agreement? We're doing it in the context of the call. Should there be any written follow-up that happens, with that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Pete. And my first response is absolutely there should be a follow-up. We recommend as the best practice that we always follow up a verbal discovery agreement with something in writing or electronic. Pushback that people will say sometimes. They'll say, well, Herb, yeah, I kind of see that, but doggone it, if I do that, the reality is they're not going to read it anyway. They're just going to ignore it. I always come back with so what? But I try to get them to understand. They will see, though, as we transition from discovering into advocating, why this is such a critical thing to do. Plus, it's the right thing to do. To document this is very, very important, to document this every step of the way. So as you coach and train your people through this, put that out there, set the expectation that for every call, verbal discovery agreement, also a written discovery agreement, and hold them accountable. There's a lot of upside into it.
Herb, I love it. I'd say, in our discussion about discovery, at least 3 or 4 times you talked about practice and preparation, which is a great segue. Good discovery is, I'd say, at least 50% in the preparation. Can you envision the outcome that you want? And that can't happen by accident, right? You have to see it before it occurs, and that only happens through good preparation. Boy, the sales do loop is your one-stop shop for all of your sales resources. To really make it a discipline. So for your district managers and area managers, it can't be a one-time event. This needs to be how we operate, how we do business. This is how we prepare. This is our biggest differentiator from us and our competition, is we prepare better. We have a better vision for how the call is going to go. And you have simple tools to help you do that. One, it are your counselor salesperson and versatile salesperson pre-call planners. Those are all housed on the sales do loop. Use the appropriate CSP planner for the phase that you're in. Incorporate the VSP quick planner, which is agnostic, if you will. You can use that for any phase that you're in, whether it's relating, discovering, advocating, or even supporting as appropriate. And then if you really, really want to take it to the next level, if you want to Ben Duffy, like Herb mentioned before, at every phase of the sales process, prepare a customer meeting agenda. By putting that meeting agenda together, you've really then, in essence, taken your Ben Duffy list of questions and you've brought them to life. And if you recall, one of my favorite videos of Counselor Salesperson of all is the Ben Duffy video itself. And if you really recall, he types out the list of questions on his typewriter, right? Many of you don't even know what a typewriter still is. But he types them out on a typewriter, and then he exchanged the list of questions with the big gruff president there. And if you remember, he got 7 out of the 10 questions right, which is fantastic. It was a good basis for discussion. I would submit to you now, given our technology, you have the opportunity to get 10 out of 10 questions right by simply sharing your meeting agenda with your customer or with your prospect proactively and asking for their feedback. And I promise you that works immensely well. I used it myself when I was in sales, and it just took the preparation to a whole nother level, and it changed the paradigm of our interaction. Incredibly, where now it went from my sales call, something I was doing to the customer, to it was our meeting. The customer had bought into what we were going to discuss, and it was just a great way to have these discovery agreements, because the next meeting agenda let the path forward for where we were going, and it was just a powerful way to build and show good preparation, good professionalism, propriety, competence, all those things, good intent, with the customers moving forward. And 9 times out of 10, when you go do this, I promise you, your customer's going to have that document printed out, because this just in, they don't want their time wasted either, right? So your preparation is going to help them. Your preparation is going to differentiate you from the myriad of other sales vendors that are calling on them. And you're better than a vendor. As Herb mentioned, you're striving to become trusted advisor, right? So you're better than just a vendor or a peddler. And the way you're going to demonstrate that is through your preparation and your pre-call planning.
Well, I like it, Pete. Just a couple of caveats, if it's okay. I like
Sure.
to add to what you just said. I tell you pieced something up really, really beautifully. The whole concept of planning, the caveat is, coach your people on not being too prescriptive, about being too prescriptive with the planning. What I mean by that is, if they make it too detailed, the tendency is to get married to the plan. And in real life, customers very rarely go by your script. So I say that to say this: tend to do it in big buckets and bullet points, little reminders that can keep them on point. But don't make this long, drawn-out plan, because it would only create confusion, because your customers will not necessarily go along. Keep that in mind. The other thing I'll add is, and I'll break propriety a little bit and go to this. I just can't resist it. Here's what I'm going to do. and I'm gonna do this. I think everyone's got this. Make sure, you know where I'm going, Pete.
CSP app.
This is it. Now make sure your people have got that app and encourage them to use it as a just-in-time kind of thing, or even as they get ready to plan for those calls. Leverage these tools. You also have the Wilson Learning Resource Connection site as well. So there are lots of tools that your people can access very, very quickly, 24/7, to help them, as Pete just referenced with this planning piece. Make those tools work for you. That's what we ask you to do.
Fantastic advice. I love the focus on not getting too prescriptive. You know, so that just to piggyback on top of that for just 1 second, the potential danger of having a by the numbers agenda is that it becomes very, very rigid. And that's the beauty of the active listening exercise, you know, where you're just talking to a friend, right? You know, so your response should be the natural next question, right? And then you're flowing through your agenda, right? And digging deeper into it and flowing back and forth, up and down, and not being too prescriptive and too rigid. So thanks for really, really driving home that point, Herb.